You know, I was talking to my neighbor Sarah just last week. She's 68, been married for 45 years, raised 4 beautiful children, and she said something that just broke my heart. She told me, "I don't understand why my own kids treat me like I don't matter anymore." Maybe you've felt that sting too. Maybe you've sat at your kitchen table holding your coffee, wondering when the people you love most started treating you like you're invisible. Or worse, like you're a burden. If that hits close to home, I want you to know something right away. You're not alone, and you're definitely not imagining things. What's happening to you is real, it hurts, and it's happening to more folks over 60 than anyone wants to admit. But here's what I also want you to know. You don't have to let it steal your peace. You don't have to let it dim the light you've worked so hard to keep burning all these years. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially after talking to so many wonderful people like yourself who are dealing with family situations that just don't feel right. You know what I mean. Those conversations where your adult children talk to you like you're a child, where your opinions suddenly don't matter, where your years of wisdom get brushed aside like yesterday's newspaper. Or maybe it's subtler than that. Maybe it's the way they roll their eyes when you share a story, or how they change the subject when you're talking, or the way they make plans without even thinking to include you. Let me tell you about my friend Robert. He's 72, spent 30 years as a high school principal, raised 3 kids who all went to college, and now he spends his retirement volunteering at the local food bank and tending to a garden that would make better homes and gardens jealous. But when his family gets together, you'd think he was just some old man who doesn't know anything about anything. His daughter corrects him constantly, his son-in-law interrupts him, and his grandkids barely look up from their phones when he's talking. Robert told me something that really stuck with me. He said, "I taught teenagers for 3 decades. I know the difference between someone who's busy and someone who just doesn't respect you anymore." That's when it hit me. Respect isn't something that should disappear just because you've gotten older. If anything, the respect should be deeper now, richer, more meaningful. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is what we really need to talk about. When family members start treating us with less respect, our natural instinct is to fight back, to demand better treatment, to get louder and more insistent. And you know what happens? We end up feeling more frustrated, more hurt, and often more disconnected from the people we love. It's like we're caught in this terrible cycle where the harder we try to get respect, the further away it seems to drift. So what do? How do we handle this without losing our minds or our hearts in the process? How do we protect our peace while still maintaining relationships with people who seem to have forgotten that we're still the same sharp, caring, valuable people we've always been? The first thing I want you to understand is that this isn't about you becoming a doormat. This isn't about accepting disrespectful behavior or pretending it doesn't hurt. What we're talking about is something much more powerful. We're talking about taking control of your emotional well-being in a way that actually makes you stronger, not weaker. Think about it this way. When you were younger, maybe in your 30s or 40s, and someone treated you poorly, what did you do? You probably found ways to distance yourself, to protect your energy, to choose who deserved your time and attention. Well, guess what? You still have that power. In fact, you might have even more of it now because you've learned so much about what really matters in life. I was talking to my friend Margaret about this just yesterday. She's 65, loves her morning walks around the neighborhood, and has the most beautiful collection of quilts you've ever seen. For years, her son would come over and criticize everything, her housekeeping, her cooking, even her choice of TV shows. She'd spend days after his visits feeling terrible about herself, questioning everything she did. Then something shifted. Margaret realized that she didn't have to absorb his negativity. She didn't have to let his bad mood become her bad mood. She started what she calls her invisible shield technique, When he'd start his criticizing, she'd imagine herself surrounded by this protective barrier that his words just couldn't penetrate. Not because she stopped caring about him, but because she finally understood that his behavior said more about his own issues than it did about her worth as a person. This brings me to something really important that I want you to remember. When family members treat us with disrespect, it's often not really about us at all. Think about your own life experiences. When you were going through tough times, maybe when you were struggling with work stress or relationship problems or health scares, were you always at your best with everyone around you? Probably not. We're all human, and sometimes our own pain makes us behave in ways that hurt the people we love. Now, I'm not making excuses for disrespectful behavior. There's never a good reason to treat someone badly, especially someone who's loved you and supported you for years. But understanding the why behind someone's actions can help us respond from a place of strength rather than just hurt feelings. Your adult children might be dealing with pressures you don't even know about. Maybe they're stressed about their own aging, worried about their finances, struggling in their marriages, or feeling overwhelmed by the demands of raising their own kids. Sometimes, sadly, people take out their frustrations on the people they feel safest with, and that's often their parents. Here's what I've learned works better than fighting fire with fire. Instead of demanding respect, we're going to earn it back by showing them who we really are. Instead of getting smaller in response to their behavior, we're going to get bigger, not louder, but bigger in spirit, in confidence, in the way we carry ourselves through the world. Building your foundation. You know what's interesting about respect? It's like a garden. The more you tend to your own, the more it grows, and eventually, other people can't help but notice the beauty of what you've cultivated. I've seen this happen over and over again with folks who've learned to focus on their own growth instead of trying to control how others treat them. Let me tell you about Tom, a 69-year-old retired mechanic who loves fishing and still volunteers at his church every Sunday. For years, his daughter would call him only when she needed something: money, babysitting, help with household repairs. But during their conversations, she'd talk to him like he was bothering her, even though she was the one asking for favors. Tom would hang up feeling used and unappreciated, and the cycle would just repeat itself. One day, Tom decided to try something different. Instead of waiting for his daughter to call, he started reaching out to her differently. He'd call just to share something interesting, maybe a story about the fish he caught that morning, or something funny that happened at church, or just to ask about her day without needing anything in return. At first, she seemed surprised, even a little suspicious. But gradually, something beautiful started happening. Their conversations became more balanced, more genuine, more like the relationship they used to have when she was younger. The magic wasn't that Tom changed his daughter. The magic was that Tom changed how he showed up in the relationship. He stopped being the person who was always hurt and started being the person who had interesting things to share, who was living a full life, who didn't need her approval to feel good about himself. This is what I call building your foundation of inner peace, and it's something every one of us can do, regardless of how our family members are behaving. It starts with remembering who you are beyond your role as someone's parent or grandparent. You're a whole, complete, fascinating person with decades of experiences, wisdom, interests, and dreams. When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? When was the last time you learned something new, not because you had to, but because you were curious? When was the last time you spent time with people who truly appreciate you for who you are right now? I think about my friend Eleanor, who's 74, and decided last year to take up watercolor painting. She'd never painted a thing in her life, but she saw a class advertised at the community center and thought, why not? Her family initially made jokes about her new hobby, but you know what happened? Eleanor got good at it, really good. And more importantly, she got happy. She started glowing with this quiet confidence that came from pursuing something she loved. Now, when her family gathers, instead of sitting quietly while others dominate the conversation, Eleanor talks about her art, about the people in her class, about the painting she's working on. She's not demanding attention. She's sharing her genuine enthusiasm, and people are drawn to that energy. Her granddaughter even asked if Eleanor would teach her some techniques. The beautiful thing about focusing on your own growth and happiness is that it takes the pressure off your relationships. When you're not desperately needing your family's approval or respect to feel good about yourself, you can interact with them from a place of strength rather than neediness. And here's what's almost magical about this. People are naturally drawn to others who are content and confident. It's like a magnet. But let's be honest about something. This isn't always easy, especially when you're dealing with family members who seem determined to treat you poorly. There are going to be days when their words sting, when their indifference hurts, when you wonder if you're fighting a losing battle. On those days, I want you to remember something important. Their behavior is not a reflection of your worth. You've lived a full life. You've made mistakes and learned from them. You've celebrated victories and survived losses. You've loved deeply and given generously. You've accumulated wisdom that only comes from decades of living. None of that changes because someone else fails to recognize it. I always think about trees when I'm dealing with difficult people. You know how some trees grow in harsh conditions, rocky soil, strong winds, limited water, and they become incredibly strong and beautiful precisely because they've had to adapt and persist? That's what we can become too. The challenges we face, including disrespectful treatment from family members, can actually make us stronger and more resilient if we approach them with the right mindset. One of the most powerful things you can do is start setting what I call gentle boundaries. These aren't walls that shut people out, but rather clear guidelines about how you're willing to engage. For example, if your adult child always criticizes your housekeeping when they visit, you might say something like, "I appreciate that you want to help, but I'm comfortable with how I keep my home. Let's talk about something more pleasant." The key is to say this calmly, without anger or defensiveness, and then actually change the subject. You're not arguing about whether their criticism is valid. You're simply stating that you're not available for that type of conversation. It's like changing the channel on a TV show you don't want to watch. My friend Joyce, who's 71 and loves her morning yoga classes, had to learn this with her son, who would constantly give her unsolicited advice about her finances, her health, her social life, basically everything. Joyce realized that these conversations always left her feeling bad about herself, so she started responding with something like, "I understand you care about me, and I appreciate that. I've got things handled though. Tell me about what's going on with you." At first, her son kept pushing, trying to give advice anyway, but Joyce stayed consistent. She'd acknowledge his concern, redirect the conversation, and refuse to engage in debates about her choices. Eventually, he got the message, and their conversations became much more enjoyable for both of them. Living with strength and grace. You know what I've learned after all these years of watching people navigate difficult family relationships? The folks who maintain their peace and dignity are not the ones who never face disrespect. They are the ones who've learned how to respond to it in ways that protect their hearts while keeping their relationships intact. Let me share something that might surprise you. Sometimes, the family members who treat us poorly are actually afraid. They're afraid of getting older themselves, afraid of facing their own mortality, afraid of the changes that come with time. When they see us, vibrant, active people over 60, sometimes their own fears get projected onto us in the form of dismissive or controlling behavior. I think about my neighbor Bill, who's 76 and still beats me at tennis every Saturday morning. His middle-aged son started treating him like he was fragile and incompetent right around the time the son turned 50. It wasn't about Bill's capabilities at all. It was about his son's panic about his own aging process. Once Bill understood this, he stopped taking the behavior personally and started responding with patience and humor instead of hurt feelings. "Son," Bill would say with a smile, "I may be older than you, but I'm not made of glass. How about we focus on enjoying our time together?" This gentle but firm approach helped his son relax and remember that aging doesn't mean becoming helpless. Here's something else that's really important to understand. You get to choose how much of your emotional energy you invest in any relationship, including family relationships. This doesn't mean you stop loving your family members, but it does mean you stop letting their behavior control your emotional well-being. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a beautiful garden and you only have so much water to keep everything growing. You could spend all your water trying to help one struggling plant that may never thrive, or you could distribute that water among all the plants that are ready to flourish. Your emotional energy works the same way. I know a wonderful woman named Patricia who's 68 and volunteers at the animal shelter 3 days a week. She has 4 adult children, and while 3 of them treat her with love and respect, one of them consistently speaks to her in ways that are hurtful and dismissive. For years, Patricia exhausted herself trying to win over that one difficult child, often at the expense of her relationships with the other 3. Then, Patricia had what she calls her light bulb moment. She realized that by focusing so much energy on the one child who didn't appreciate her, she was actually shortchanging the 3 who did. She started investing more time and attention in those positive relationships, and something beautiful happened. Not only did those relationships grow stronger, but she became happier and more confident overall. And here's the interesting part. When Patricia stopped chasing after the difficult child's approval, when she stopped being available for drama and criticism, that child actually started treating her better. It's like they could sense that Patricia was no longer willing to accept poor treatment, so they had to step up their behavior to maintain the relationship. This brings me to one of the most important points I want to make. Respect isn't something you can demand or beg for. It's something you teach people to give you through your own behavior. When you carry yourself with dignity, when you refuse to engage in toxic conversations, when you show that you value yourself, others learn to value you too. But what about those times when family members cross lines that really can't be ignored? What about when the disrespect becomes so severe that it's actually harmful to your well-being? This is where we need to talk about the difference between being patient and being a doormat. You never have to tolerate abuse, manipulation, or treatment that genuinely damages your mental health. If a family member consistently treats you in ways that are cruel or harmful, it's completely appropriate to limit your contact with them. You can love someone from a distance. You can pray for their well-being without subjecting yourself to their toxicity. My friend Rosa, who's 73 and makes the most incredible tamales you've ever tasted, had to make this difficult choice with her eldest daughter. Despite Rosa's repeated attempts to maintain a loving relationship, her daughter would visit only to criticize, demand money, and create drama. After years of trying everything else, Rosa finally said, "I love you, but I can't continue to have you in my home when you treat me this way." It was one of the hardest things Rosa ever had to do, but it was also one of the most liberating. She redirected that energy toward her other children and grandchildren, toward her community involvement, toward activities that brought her joy. Rosa didn't stop being a loving mother. She just stopped accepting unacceptable behavior. Now, as we wrap up our conversation, I want to leave you with something really important. You are not too old to set boundaries. You are not too old to demand respectful treatment. You are not too old to walk away from relationships that consistently hurt you. And you are definitely not too old to create a life filled with people who appreciate the amazing person you are. At the same time, you're wise enough now to know that you can't control other people's behavior. You can only control your response to it. You're experienced enough to understand that some battles aren't worth fighting, and mature enough to choose peace over being right. The goal isn't to have perfect family relationships. It's to have relationships that you can participate in without losing yourself. It's to maintain your dignity, your peace of mind, and your joy regardless of how others choose to behave. Remember, you've already proven your strength by living through decades of challenges, changes, and growth. You've raised children, built careers, weathered storms, and celebrated triumphs. You have everything within you that you need to handle difficult family dynamics with grace and wisdom. Your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you. It's determined by the love you've given, the life you've lived, and the person you continue to become every single day. Don't let anyone, even people you love, convince you otherwise. Life after 60 can be filled with more peace, more joy, and more authentic relationships than you've ever experienced. Sometimes, especially when you learn to protect that peace from those who would disturb it. You deserve respect, you deserve kindness, and you deserve to feel valued for the incredible person you are. So here's my challenge for you. This week, do one thing that makes you feel proud of who you are. Take that art class, call that friend who always makes you laugh, work in your garden, read that book you've been meaning to get to, or simply sit quietly and appreciate how far you've come. And if someone in your family says something disrespectful, remember, that's information about them, not about you. Your job is to stay centered in your own worth and respond from that place of strength. You've got this, you really do, and I'd love to hear how things go for you. Leave me a comment below and tell me about a time when you successfully handled a difficult family situation, or share what you're going to try differently after our conversation today. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. The best years of your life don't have to be behind you. They can be right now, right here, as you choose peace over chaos and dignity over drama. You've earned the right to live with both.